In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to transcode video files for use in the studio, as well as transcoding the files that come out of the studio for use in other editing applications. Now, the studio uses an unusual codec called Grass Valley HQ, and this codec is only available with Grass Valley products. Now, Grass Valley products are a little hard to get hold of, but luckily the university have a computer that has EDS5, a Grass Valley editing program, installed on it. You can find it inside the TV studio, located in the same room of the gallery that the lighting desk and sound desk are in. It's by the door to the corridor. Now, for this tutorial I'm not using that computer, I'm using my own computer, and I have my own version of EDS installed on it, so there will be some differences. But the first thing you need to do is log into the studio computer, and you do this using your university username and password. Once you've logged in, and it may take a little while, you need to go on Start, Programs, and find EDS5. Now, it might be located inside the EDS folder, or it might be located inside a Grass Valley folder. And again, the version of the software you're looking for is EDS5. I happen to have EDS6, which is a slightly newer piece of software, but it's largely the same, although it will look slightly different. So there are two main settings on the first screen. The first is Profile, and the second is Projects. Now, the software should create a profile for you based on your username, but if it doesn't, you can always create a new one. In this case, I'm using Matt. Now, I have existing projects here, which might be useful if you've already started work and you need to carry on, but for this tutorial I'm going to start from scratch, so I'm going to click on New Project. The project settings window gives me a number of options. The first is the project name. In this case I'm going to call it What's Next Test, and I'm going to choose a folder for it, which will be inside What's Next EDS Projects. And also we need to choose a preset. Now, there's a preset here called HD 1080, and it's pretty much exactly what we want, except for this setting here, which is the render format. Now, it says Canopus HQ, but in fact the studio uses Canopus HQ Fine, so that's not quite what we want. So I'm going to click on Customize and hit OK. Now, it's given me a second window here in which I can alter my project settings. Now, most of them are okay. I'm just going to make a few changes. First of all, I'm going to change this to 2-channel. It doesn't really affect much, but it'll just make editing a little simpler. I'm also going to change the render format to Canopus HQ Fine. Once you've done that, just click OK. Now, it's important to note that you use a 1920 by 1080 50i project. It's important that it's interlaced because that's the format the studio uses. So once the software loads up, you'll see it looks pretty much like any other editing piece of software. You've got your preview window here, your bins here, and your timeline here, and that's all we're going to use. In the studio computer, it might load you up 2 windows here, a source and record window, but it doesn't really matter, you're only focusing on one anyway. So the first step is to go into your bins and import the files we're going to use. So today I'm going to import Studio Master, and I'm going to import Behind the Scenes Master. Now, let's control click to select both of them, and then click open. Now, these projects are in 2 different file formats, and they're the 2 file formats that I'd recommend for using for this. The first, Behind the Scenes, let's see if we can get the project properties. Is a, no, it doesn't actually say here, but it's a H.264 file at 10 megabits a second. It's what I tend to export files at for use on the web. And also I have a ProRes 422 file called Studio Tour Master. Now, usually I'd recommend bringing in files in ProRes rather than H.264, because that means you're maintaining quality. But both can work in this software, as we'll show. Now, you need to drag this file into the timeline. Now, once we've got that one in, we're also going to add the second one, and you can do that either by dragging or putting the playhead to the end of that file, right-clicking here, and doing Add to Timeline. You see there, automatically moved, which is a bit confusing. But we have Studio Tour and then behind the scenes. Now we can zoom with this scale up here. You can only scale out so far. But there you are, you can see our two files next to each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to convert both of them separately, but in a batch. So the way we do this is add them both to the timeline, and it's important you add them both to the timeline, because if you add one to the timeline, add it to the batch, delete it from the timeline, and then add another to the timeline, when the batch export happens, it will only use the media file that's currently in the timeline. Now that might be a little confusing, but just trust me, add everything to the timeline in one go. So what I've done here is I've selected an in and out point that are at the start and end of this clip. Now you do this using the I and O button on your keyboard. So press I at the start and O at the end. So now we're going to go on File, Export, Print to File, or you can press F11 on your keyboard. So here we're going to need to choose the format that we want to export in. Now in this case we're exporting to use the file in the studio. So we're going to use Canopus HQ and then select Canopus HQ Fine. Now the other thing you need to check is export between in and out. And then we're going to click Add to Batch List. And here you're going to choose where you want the files to export to. In this case I'm just going to choose the What's Next hard drive. And you can go into Computer, What's Next, and there you go. In this case I'm going to call this Studio Tour. And click Save. Don't worry about the rest of the settings. And now we're going to add another in and out. So I to set the in, O to set the out, and then do File, Export, Print to File. Again, Canopus HQ Fine. It'll show up in these recently used file. Export between in and out, add to batch list. And give that a name behind the scenes. Cool. That already exists. We'll just say yes for now. So, now we've got both of the video files ready to go in the batch export. So now we need to actually export them. How do we do that? Well, we go back on File, back into Export, and this time I'm going to click on Batch Export. Now this will bring up this window, which shows you all the videos that are in the batch ready to go. And here you can make some final changes like change the file name, or if you click on this window, change where you're saving it to, and some other settings. Once you're ready, click Export, and it'll start the process. However, I'm not going to export during this tutorial. I'm just going to click Close. And I'm now going to close this window by clicking Exit. Now I'm going to open up another project. Now it's important to note that this is quite a basic way to use EDIUS, but it is a fully fledged piece of software. So if you want, you can edit video files inside of it. You can add music, you can add titles, you can pretty much do anything. Sorry, that's not what I meant to do. Again, I'm gonna actually open a new project here. I'll just call it Untitled for now. Customize, HQ Fine, 2 channels. Okay. And there we are, it's opened a new project for me. So now I'm going to talk you through how we convert the files that come out of the studio for use in other editing applications. So add file. Now the files come out of the studio in the same format that we just converted the other ones to. Now I'm going to select these 2 clips that both come from the same week and hit OK. Now I'm going to select these 2 videos and do Add to Timeline. And the reason I'm putting both in is because I'm assuming that maybe something went wrong with the show. So maybe we recorded half of the show here and then another half here. Now hopefully that won't happen this year because we're doing live recordings. So hopefully I can remember what I'm saying as host and there won't be any mistakes. But in this case there was. So we had to do my ending twice. I can't remember why, but I'm sure it was my fault. So now we've got both, and we've set the in point to the start of the project and the out point to the end of the project. So now you can probably guess what we're going to do. File, Export, Print to File. And in this case I only want to export one video, so I'm only going to press the Export button. But I don't want to export it to Canopus HQ Fine because I want to be able to use it in other editing software. Now, the ideal option would be to be able to export it in ProRes, but unfortunately there isn't ProRes installed on this system, and there isn't on the university system, so we have to choose another codec. In this case, I'm going to use XDCAM. Now, I recommend XDCAM because it's a professional codec used by many broadcast cameras, and in this case, we're going to use XDCAM HD422 1920 by 1080 at 50i. Now, why are we choosing this one compared to the rest? Well, first of all, it's the same format as the Studio, 1920 by 1080 at 50i, so it isn't going to adjust our image too much. It's also at HD422, which means the colour space is subsampled at a rate of 422, which is ideal for editing, and also it's at 50 megabits a second, which means it's broadcast quality. I'm going to check export between and out, and click export. Now it's going to show me some options here, but you can largely ignore them. Just give it a clip name, such as show 2 or show 1. Ignore the rest of the settings. You could add this to fine or super fine if you wanted to, but normal's fine. And then click OK. Now I'm not going to because I don't want to damage the screen recording by rendering, but it will take a little time to render, as the Studio computer is a little slow. It's a little bit faster on my computer. And then you will have a finished file ready, and I can show you one that I prepared earlier, so to speak. If I go back onto the What's Next hard drive and Cooking with Sam, you see in this folder I've organised my footage, show the source footage from the Studio, the titles that we used, the XDCAM footage, which I just exported out of Edius. You can see here we've got the clip1.mxf, clip.mxf, and Cooking with Sam final.mxf, and those are the video files that we're using. And those can be natively opened inside Premiere Pro, but to use them inside Final Cut you'll need to transcode them into ProRes, and this can be done using a piece of software that's available on Sony's website if you do a bit of Google searching. I can also provide you with the link if you ask me. And that's pretty much the entire process. So if you have any more questions, feel free to ask me. I'm on the members website, and I'm also hosting most of these shows, so you should be able to find me. And that's pretty much everything. So thanks for listening. Goodbye.